Welcome everyone as well. Suppliers and customers are crucial stakeholders for all businesses. And today we will look at how we engage with these stakeholders and create beauty within our organisations. Our speakers are Steve Apted, who will share about successfully engaging with suppliers, and Daniel Ghinn, who will give us insights on how to love our customers. They will both speak for around 6 minutes, and we will follow by a time of question and answer. And I would encourage everyone to put some questions in the chat. So first we will have Steve, who is also a Faith in Business trustee and Head of Procurement for the UK and Ireland at the Salvation Army. And I did note when I did a look up that his team were an Excellence in Procurement Award winners in 2020. So Steve, over to you.
Oh, hi everybody! It's great to be here with you this afternoon. It feels really weird to be talking. I'm normally a delegate sitting listening, so this is all feels a bit strange. I've got 6 minutes, which is the amount of time it takes me to boil my eggs in the morning. So my watch is all set up for that. I've been in supply chain and procurement ever since I was 16 years old, getting on for nearly 5 or 6 years now. The profession has changed enormously in that time. I've worked across defence, aerospace, hospitality and leisure, healthcare, and since 2008 I've been working in various supply chain and procurement and operations roles in various faith-based organisations. Procurement's moved from a situation when I started in my career where suppliers were almost seen as the enemy, that the stance was sort of adversarial, quite aggressive. We're in a completely different era now, and that's a great joy. Organisations have various stakeholders ranging from investors and owners to shareholders, employees, unions, which is something that we're having to come to grips with again in the days that we're going through. And of course, in the charity sector, there are service users and there are donors. And those groups have various sort of positions in the hierarchy. Obviously, investors and owners are at the top of the pyramid. Suppliers are a key stakeholder group for any organisation, but they're often overlooked. The procurement function is often sort of seen as back of house, perhaps insignificant. But the thing about procurement, it comes into its own when the economy takes a nosedive. It's very counter-cyclical. And Margaret mentioned the SIPS award that we were honoured to receive in 2020, and that was really through the work we did in the pandemic, creating a national food supply chain operation virtually overnight when supermarket stocks started to dry up, products were rationed, people didn't want to go to the supermarkets, and we had to move very, very quickly to get that in place. The work that I've done at the Salvation Army with suppliers is really to draw them in as key, valued and integral stakeholders in the organisation. And one of the principal ways that we've done that is to invite them in periodically for supply conferences. So we invite them in with no other motive other than to draw them in to share in the mission of the Salvation Army, give them an opportunity to meet senior leaders, which they don't normally get the opportunity to meet, and for them to be thanked for all that they've done for the organisation. And we've now done 2 of these really quite significant events. The first one was in 2019 at our training college in Denmark Hill. And the theme was to look at anti-slavery and trafficking. The Salvation Army is the government provider for the care of victims of modern slavery and anti-trafficking in the UK. And we coincided the supplier conference with the National Anti-Trafficking Day and made that a key theme. And we had a number of speakers from parts of the organisation that work in that area. We took them through the history of the Salvation Army. Gary Grant of The Entertainer, who owns The Entertainer, was our keynote speaker, and he held the audience in the palm of his hand for an hour. Most amazing presentation from Gary. Really shared the gospel and his love for Jesus with the audience. I sat at the back holding my head in my hands, thinking that there's going to be a riot at the end of this. Everybody thinks that I brought them in to proselytize them. And Gary came very close to getting a standing ovation at the end, which was quite extraordinary. And then last autumn, we ran another supplier event at Strawberry Field up in Liverpool. And Strawberry Field has a very strong heritage with the Beatles. One of the Beatles lived just down the road from Strawberry Field, John Lennon, and he had a very unhappy childhood. He actually used to climb over the walls into the children's home. He was happier playing in the children's home with the children than he was in his own home situation. And his links with Strawberry Field later in life resulted in him writing the famous Strawberry Fields Forever musical. And that heritage with the Beatles has been built on at the site, which has been completely redeveloped. It's now a training centre for young people with learning difficulties, and it's part of the Beatles Heritage Tour. So we hosted suppliers up there for the day, and again just shared the work of the Salvation Army with them in a very informal way. And we had Mark Mitchell, who's a successful businessman based up in the northwest of England, who came and like Gary, was very warmly received and very positively shared his Christian message in the way that he engages with his customers. So we do obviously have difficult discussions with suppliers from time to time. We have quite tough negotiations from time to time. Things don't always go well. We have to hold difficult meetings. Not every supplier is successful in renewing contracts. Sometimes we have to say goodbye to suppliers, but we try to honour suppliers by treating them with honesty, openness and integrity, and try to, as far as possible, give them honest and accurate feedback in terms of their performance, and give them good recognition where they serve us well. That bleep in the background was my timer telling me that my eggs are now boiled. So at that point, I'm going to hand back to Margaret. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. And before we do any questions and answers, I'll ask Daniel to speak. Daniel is chair, of Worship Works, a faith-based organisation which supports individuals and business organisations and others. And along with doing that, he's also Chief Executive Officer of Creation.co, which develops insights in the healthcare sector. I don't really know how to develop that statement anymore, so I'm going to hand over to Daniel and ask him to elaborate and give us a wee bit of an insight into how we can love our customers.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Margaret. And yeah, thanks. Great to be here. Thanks, Steve, for that presentation on procurement. And I love the setup you've got here with a presentation on procurement and a presentation. I'm going to speak specifically on selling. So I as well as leading a Christian ministry called Worship.Works, which trains and equips people in the workplace to serve God through work. We run a Christian graduate program for Christian graduates to come and get placed into business and coached and supported to serve God through their work as they start their careers. I'm also CEO, as Margaret said, of a consultancy to the healthcare sector. We work mostly with major healthcare companies and organizations providing business intelligence, insights, and consulting. So my role as founder and CEO of the company has involved quite a lot of selling along the way, and working with procurement teams and buyers. And so it's something I've been really passionate about, and actually, particularly, how do we see, how can God use us in the act of selling? So one question that I asked a group of young professionals some years ago was, how do you see sales? How do you see the act of selling? And it's a good question to ask ourselves. What do we think of? If you think of somebody as a salesperson, what do you think of? And the response I had from this particular group of young professionals was, sales is a bit sort of not very pleasant. You probably can't be trusted if someone's a salesperson. You think about a sort of typical used car salesperson, you can't really trust them. This idea, it's a bit sleazy maybe. And it's interesting because I think that, as Christians, and when I was growing up as a Christian, I was very conscious that we've got really good news to share, but we're not always very good at sharing that good news as if it's really good news. So I was relieved when, sometime during my 30s, I read a book by Ed Silvoso called Prayer Evangelism. And in this book, Ed Silvoso focuses on Luke 10, in which Jesus sends the disciples out in pairs, and he gives them a set of instructions for evangelism. And he says, first of all, whatever house you enter, speak peace. In other words, find the man or woman of peace that's there in that house, in that household. He tells them to stay in that house, eat what they set before you, for the worker is worth their wages. He says, in other words, what we might say, fellowship with them, get to know them, build relationship. And then he says to them, heal the sick that are there. So find out, what they need and meet those felt needs through miracles, and then proclaim to them the kingdom of God has come to you. And I loved that as an evangelism model. It was great because you didn't have to go and preach and teach about the kingdom of God. You demonstrated it and you lived it out through relationship. And then I realized that evangelism is itself a lot like sales. In fact, I used to employ a kind of head of sales, and his job title was chief evangelist. And it's a job title that's become a bit known in the sort of Silicon Valley era, evangelism as an act of selling, if you like. I mean, we've got good news about something positive that will benefit others. And that's the same actually in if we're selling a good service or products, but also as in evangelism, as in Christian evangelism of our faith. We've got good news about something good that's going to benefit others. And in fact, in the sense of our faith, it's free. And it'll cost you your whole life, but you'll get way more life back. And that's the good news, isn't it? And when it comes to selling a service or a product, there has to be a value exchange that feels good to both parties. The buyer, Steve, needs to believe that the value they're going to receive is worth at least what they're paying for it. And the seller has to believe that they're getting a good return for their work or their product, their service. So good sales is actually win-win. There should be no, we talk about buyer's remorse, no fear that as a buyer, I might have made the wrong decision. The buyer needs to go away confident they've made the right decision, happy with what they've got, happy it represents good value. So thinking back to this sort of group of young professionals and the discussion I had with them about how we see sales, I asked them, what if selling could actually be a good thing? What if it was actually a way to serve or bless others? And I think that the first thing to do for that to happen is to change our minds about sales, to see it primarily as for the benefit of the buyer. So we really want to do something good for them. Some years ago, we had a young intern working in our team, and he was reaching out to a potential client who worked in a major corporation. And he asked me, how do I know when I'm just reaching out to them too much? I think we've got a good service for them. I'm not getting a response. I don't just want to become really annoying. And the answer to that was actually, get it right in your heart first. Do you really want to do something good for them? Are you really doing this in their interests, not in your own interest as the seller? And if you can get that right, you'll know then what's the best way to reach out, as you would if you were reaching out to a friend, to put that into it, effectively to put love into it. I mean, what if Jesus was selling? How would he do it? And what if we were to follow his evangelism instructions in Luke 10 when we're selling, to go and find a man or woman of peace, and to actually work out sales in the way that he instructed his disciples effectively to sell the kingdom of God. So this is what it looks like. I call it love to sell. So we put love at the heart of sales. So first, find the man or woman of peace who in that organization, in that company or place you're looking to sell to, is open to building a great relationship. That's your man or woman of peace. How can we serve them before the sale, not just through the thing they buy from us, but how can we serve them right from the start, from the first encounter? How can that be a blessing to them? How can it serve them? How can it be good for them? Do we have, for example, a useful resource, some advice, a recommendation that's going to be valuable for them? Do we have something that they really need that we can help with? And now maybe we're talking about a project, a piece of consulting, and we want to help them to buy well. We don't just want to close the deal to hit a sales target. We want to do good for them because actually we love them. And so putting that love at the heart of it changes the attitude and approach for it. Now, as in Luke 10, they set a meal before us. It says, eat what they set before you. They pay us while we continue to serve them and love them and provide the service. So what they get is a great service. And because we put love into the sales process, we start with love, it's actually catching. So what happens is that our client teams work better together. They solve problems more effectively, and then they come back for more. So we've got a loyal, repeat sale client. So when you think about love, the passage is often read out in wedding ceremonies, etc. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4-7. Use that as a guide to sell. If you took the word selling instead of loving, instead of love, sell instead of love. So selling is patient and kind. Selling does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. Selling doesn't rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. Selling bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And the result is, and has been for us, amazing relationships with clients who are impacted way beyond the delivery of the sale itself.
Thank you, Daniel. We now have a short time for question and answers. And there are a few in the chat. And I'll start with the first one that's come up from Fiona. She asks, the mentality of hierarchy in an organization, how much more beautiful do you think it would look if there was a philosophy of equality? And I think that's aimed at Steve.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I saw that in the chat. I've been pondering over that. I mean, I think certainly the style that I try to engender with my team is one of consultation and inclusion. But there are times when somebody has to make a decision. Sometimes there are tough decisions, there are hard decisions, and you can't always operate on the basis of complete equality. Somebody has to say, look, we're going to do this and we're not going to do that because things are mutually exclusive and there are limited resources and there are limited times. So I fully adhere to the principle of including as many people as you can, as soon as you can, and consulting as widely as you can. But ultimately, in any finite, limited organization, somebody has to make choice.
Thank you. And the next one from Lawrence is aimed at Daniel, I think. How do you define a win-win relationship? Sorry, no, it's Steve also, with suppliers. And how do you ensure that your procurement processes reflect your values rather than a transactional approach?
So, Steve, let me add to that. Part of the challenge that I have is someone who has to go through procurement for a lot of multinational companies is they I hear all the warm words, and then you hit the procurement process and oh my word, it's like hitting a tidal wave coming the other direction. And it is It is bureaucratic. It is awful. It is very unfriendly. The technology is awful. The approach is awful. The questions are awful, and often the process gets in the way of the love. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's a shame I'm not in my office in London, because I've got a poster with all those words on the wall. People do business with people. So I work really hard with the team to get the team's attitude right. So I'll often pull the team back if I think they're being overly bureaucratic, overly obstructive, overly demanding. I'll pull them back. I think Daniel hit it in his presentation that there has to be whatever deal has to be acceptable to both sides. And win-win doesn't mean 50-50. But both sides need to leave feeling as though they've got a sustainable, good piece of business in place. They've got to make a profit out of it. It's got to be sustainable and deliverable. So that's the principle. Bureaucracy always grows up in organisations. One of the big fights I've had in the last 6 years at the Salvation Army is to keep forcing people to simplify things. People get into a room, they pile in. People get on an ego trip by making things sound more and more complex and difficult. And continually you have to strip back and say, let's get this back to the simple basics. What are we trying to achieve here? And focus on those. I don't know if you want to come in, Daniel.
I think that's right. I think that's a good deal is win-win, and I think that you're right in terms of the bureaucracy. You know, I'm fortunate to work in a small company. We've got a team of 25 people, so we're relatively free of that. But I'm even conscious as we grow and develop and we implement processes and all that kind of thing, systems to follow, keeping quality good. You're right, Steve, what you said there about humans. It's the human element, it's relationship. Whatever, even, you know, we look at some of we sell to large corporate clients, and whatever department or system or process we're working with, it always comes down to relationship with individuals. And that's why I think that's where I think the opportunity is to put love into it, because I think our clients buy from the consultancy that I run. They buy from us because of maybe specific credentials and products and services, but they come back because they experience the relationship, and that creates that kind of loyalty. They realize that it's good to work with our team because they experience that love.
I think that one of the things I'm very conscious of at the Salvation Army, it's a household name. If we give suppliers a really bad experience, they'll remember that for decades. If it's Joe Blogg's engineering company down the road, they'll just move on. But if it's the Salvation Army, that tends to stick in their mind. And so I'm very, very conscious of our reputation and our reputational impact on the way we treat people and the way we conduct business.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. I think there's been some really interesting comments in the chat, and we're not going to have time to go through them all. But there's one here from Rob, which talks about social value can be a mutually beneficial bond between organisations, customers and suppliers. Is enough focus on the wider benefits that organisations can align around in their dealings? Do you want to start, Daniel?
Social value, yes, that's right. Yeah, I suppose you mean that. I think by that you mean the impact, the value that you can bring into the community, right? Is that the kind of the essence of that that idea? Can be mutually beneficial bond between organizations, customers, and suppliers. I think that one of the things that we look for when we're working with clients is a set of shared values and a shared sense of the difference that we can make, and maybe that's one of the elements behind that question. Can a customer and supplier work together to make a better social impact? I definitely think so, and I think that actually alignment around goals to make a difference can make a huge difference to a successful working relationship. We were working with a client recently who was trying to renegotiate a contract that had been agreed. And so we actually thought, well, how do we approach this? And we said, well, let's go to that company's core values and see if we can actually, appeal to the core values for fairness and so on. And then we realized that wasn't anywhere in their core values, and that maybe there wasn't such an alignment of values in terms of the difference we were looking to make, and that's maybe harder. But when we find clients where there is a shared set of values, or there's some shared element in our values, we know that the difference we can make actually beyond each other, beyond ourselves, is far greater, and I think can lead to a great working relationship.